everyone, and welcome back to Western Flavors. Before we get into our new episode, let's recap the intense, action-packed events of our last story. After discovering Nathan's sinister plan, Ty was forced to run for his life, escaping a thrilling chase through Calgary. His desperate journey back to the safety of the woods ended in a fall, and while unconscious, he was hit with a massive, overwhelming flood of his returning memories, both the beautiful life he had with his family and the traumatic horror of his captivity. The story ended on a huge cliffhanger as Ty, his memory and identity finally restored, was on the brink of collapse and was rescued on a lonely road by a familiar, beloved face. If you missed that incredible jaw-dropping story, the full playlist is linked for you in the description below. If you're enjoying this new season, please take a second to hit that like button and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a chapter. Now, today, the reunion begins, but it's a reunion full of secrets, as a man must listen to the story of his own life from a best friend who doesn't recognize him. The cab of Caleb Odell's truck was a small, rumbling sanctuary against the vast, empty landscape of the Alberta foothills. For Ty, the simple act of sitting on the worn vinyl passenger seat, the familiar, dusty scent of the truck, and the steady, capable presence of the man beside him was a profound and surreal comfort. He had spent the last 48 hours in a state of constant adrenaline-fueled motion, a desperate solo journey through a hostile wilderness. Now, for the first time, he was safe. He was with his friend, even if his friend had no idea. He stared out the window, his gaze drinking in the familiar, beloved scenery, the rolling, golden-green hills, the dark, stoic stands of pine and aspen trees, the brilliant, endless blue of the sky. It was all a powerful, beautiful, and heartbreaking confirmation of his own resurrected memory. He was home. He was really, truly home. The joy of it was so overwhelming, so profound, it was a physical ache in his chest, a feeling so intense it threatened to spill out of him in a torrent of tears. He fought it back, forcing himself to remain calm, to maintain the facade of the quiet, anonymous drifter that Caleb believed him to be. Caleb, for his part, kept glancing over at the strange, silent man beside him. He had picked him up out of a simple cowboy sense of duty. You don't leave a man stranded on the side of the road, but there was something about this guy. He was a wreck, that was for sure. The beard, the grime, the haunted, exhausted look in his eyes, it all spoke of a man who had been through hell. But there was something else too. A strange, unsettling feeling of familiarity that Caleb couldn't quite shake. He cleared his throat, breaking the long, heavy silence.
So, Hudson, huh?
You got family there? A job? Ty kept his gaze fixed on the window, his own voice a low, rough rasp.
Something like that. Just trying to get back to a place I used to know.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
Caleb said, a hint of his own recent, painful history in his voice. He drove in silence for another few minutes, the strange, nagging feeling of recognition growing stronger. It wasn't the man's face, which was hidden behind the wild beard and the dirt. It was something else. The way he held himself, even in his exhaustion. The quiet, thoughtful way he looked out at the land.
You know, it's crazy.
He said, a small, nostalgic smile on his face.
You don't look anything like him. Not really. But from the side, the way you're looking out at those hills, you remind me of a buddy of mine. A guy named Ty.
The name, spoken so casually, so full of a deep, sorrowful affection, was a gut punch to Ty. He had to physically restrain himself from reacting, from turning to his friend and shouting, "It's me, I'm here." But he held it in. It wasn't time. Not yet. He had to understand. He had to know what the last 4 years had been like for the people he had left behind. And the man sitting right beside him, the man who was closer to him than a brother, was the one person who could give him the unvarnished, honest truth. He saw his opening.
Oh yeah? What's his story?
He asked, his own voice a carefully constructed mask of simple, detached curiosity. Caleb let out a long, slow sigh, his gaze drifting to the road ahead, but his mind was 1,000 miles away in the past.
His story. Man, where do I even start? He was my best friend. Oh, more like a brother, really. He passed away 4 years ago now. Still feels like yesterday sometimes.
He fell silent for a moment, lost in the memory. Ty's own heart ached with a profound, surreal sorrow. He was listening to his own eulogy.
He was the best man I ever knew. Not at first, though.
A real, genuine laugh, full of warmth and memory, escaped him.
When he first showed up at Heartland, he was this angry, messed up kid from the city. Had a chip on his shoulder the size of a mountain. Me and him, we were like two dogs fighting over the same bone at first. We fought over everything. Jobs, horses, a girl, of course. Amy, the girl he ended up marrying.
He shook his head, a look of fond, bittersweet nostalgia on his face.
But we figured it out. We grew up. We went from rivals to, well, to brothers. We had each other's backs, no matter what. Through everything. My first stupid marriage, his own family drama. We were a team.
He began to tell stories, the memories pouring out of him now, a warm, welcome flood. He told the story of the time they had gone on a disastrous cattle drive together, getting lost in a blizzard and almost freezing to death, a story that ended somehow in them laughing so hard they couldn't breathe. He told the story of the night Ty had helped him sober up after his first divorce, sitting with him all night in a cheap motel room, a silent, steady presence in the darkest moment of his life. Ty listened, and with every story, a new door in his own memory was unlocked. He remembered it all. The biting cold of the blizzard, the taste of the cheap whiskey in that motel room, the feeling of his best friend's unwavering, unconditional loyalty. He was a man listening to the beautiful, forgotten chapters of his own life, and the feeling was so overwhelming, so profoundly, beautifully, and heartbreakingly real that he had to turn his head to the window, pretending to be looking at the scenery, to hide the silent tears that were now streaming down his face. Caleb drove on, lost in the warm, bittersweet haze of the past. The stories of his friendship with Ty were a well-worn, comfortable blanket, a source of profound, nostalgic comfort. He was so wrapped up in the happy memories in the ghost of his own youth that he didn't seem to notice the silent, profound, and deeply emotional reaction of the stranger who sat beside him. Ty kept his face turned to the window, the beautiful, sprawling landscape of the Alberta foothills a welcome, blurry shield for the silent tears that were still streaming down his face. To hear his own life, his own friendship, described with such a deep, abiding, and uncomplicated love was a gift, a profound and beautiful validation of the man he had been. After a long, comfortable silence, the mood in the truck began to shift. The warm, golden glow of the happy memories began to recede, replaced by the darker, more somber shadows of what had come after. Caleb's cheerful, nostalgic tone grew quieter, heavier, the easy smile on his face slowly fading.
He was the best man I ever knew. I was the best man at his wedding, and he was supposed to be the best man at mine. The second time around. I mean, with Cass.
The name of his second ex-wife, a name that was its own universe of pain and regret, hung in the air for a moment.
But he never got the chance. He was gone by then.
Vaka! Vaka!
He took a deep, shaky breath, the pain of his friend's loss still a raw, open wound even after 4 long years.
It was a mess.
Oh!
The whole thing. 1 minute he's fine, he's happy, he's finally got everything he ever wanted. A wife who adores him, a beautiful little girl, the vet practice he built from the ground up. He was on top of the world. And the next minute,
He's just gone.
He recounted the story of Ty's death, the details a grim, well-rehearsed litany of tragedy. He spoke of the sudden, shocking collapse in the paddock, the frantic, useless attempts to save him, the cold, sterile finality of the hospital.
a blood clot. That's what they said.
Sana.
From an old injury. Just a freak accident. A 1 in a million piece of bad luck. 1 minute he's here, and the next he's a story you're telling a 4-year-old girl who doesn't understand why her daddy isn't coming home.
He shook his head, a look of profound, helpless anger on his face.
It almost destroyed her.
Amy.
For a long time after, she was just hollowed out, a ghost in her own house. If it wasn't for Lindy, for Jack,
Amy. I don't know if she would have made it.
we were all so damn scared for her.
He looked over at Ty, at the rough, bearded stranger who had asked about his friend's story.
It changed all of us.
Hey.
You don't just lose someone like that and go back to being the person you were. It leaves a hole, a big, gaping, and ugly hole. And you spend the rest of your life trying to figure out how to live around it.
Ty listened to the story of his own death, of his wife's profound, soul-shattering grief, and a new and even more powerful emotion began to burn through his own tears. It was rage, a cold, clean, and righteous rage, because he knew the truth. It wasn't a freak accident. It wasn't a 1 in a million piece of bad luck. It was a lie, a brilliant, intricate, and evil lie that had been so expertly crafted that it had fooled everyone, even the people who had loved him most. And the architect of that lie, the man who was responsible for all of this pain, for his wife's grief, for his daughter's loss, for his best friend's sorrow, was at this very moment, likely sitting at their kitchen table, a welcome, trusted friend, a smiling, charming predator in the heart of his home. The need to reveal himself, to tell Caleb the unbelievable, impossible truth, was a burning physical urgency, but he held it back. Not yet. He needed more. He needed to understand the full scope of the last 4 years. He needed to know everything. He finally turned from the window, his own face a carefully constructed mask of a stranger's sympathetic curiosity, his eyes hidden in the shadow of his beard and his worn, dirty hat.
It sounds like you miss him a lot.
Every day, man. Every single day.
And his wife, Amy.
You said she's doing better now?
Yeah, she is.
She's strong. The strongest person I know.
It took a long time, but she's
She's finding her way back. There's this other guy now. Nathan.
a good dude, a rancher. He's been good for her. Good for Lindy.
The words, meant to be a testament to Amy's resilience, were a fresh, sharp twist of the knife in Ty's gut. He had to force himself to keep his own expression neutral, to not betray the violent, possessive rage that was now coiling in his stomach. This was the opening he had been waiting for. This was his chance to understand the man who was his enemy. The name Nathan landed in the small, intimate space of the truck's cab like a grenade. Ty's entire body went rigid, his hands clenching into tight, white-knuckled fists on his lap. The casual, heartbreaking way Caleb had said it, "He's been good for her," was a fresh, sharp twist of the knife in his gut. He had to fight, with every ounce of his being, to keep the raw, violent rage he felt from showing on his face, to maintain the carefully constructed mask of the curious, anonymous stranger. He needed to know more. He needed to understand the full scope of this man's infiltration into his life. He kept his own voice a low, carefully neutral murmur.
This Nathan guy. So he and Amy are together?
Whoa, there! No, not like that. Not yet. Anyway, it's complicated. You know, she's been through a lot. 4 years is a long time. But for a love like the one she had with Ty, it might as well be yesterday. But Nathan, he's patient. He's a good man. And he's definitely waiting in the wings. We all see it.
The image of Nathan, patient, waiting, a vulture circling his own life, made Ty's blood run cold. He had to change the subject, to move away from this raw, painful topic before his own control shattered completely. He turned his attention back to Caleb, to the sad, nostalgic look on his friend's face. He saw his opening, a chance to not just learn more, but to begin the slow, deliberate process of his own reveal.
It sounds like you really loved your friend.
He was the best.
Caleb said, his voice thick with an uncomplicated, profound sincerity.
But it sounds like you had some rough times too. You mentioned a first marriage?
The question, a direct reference to a story Caleb had told him, was a subtle shift. He was no longer just a passive listener. He was an active participant in the conversation. Caleb, so lost in his own river of memory, didn't seem to notice.
Oh man, Ashley.
He said the name with a long, drawn-out sigh that was a mixture of old pain and a new, more recent, and even more complicated hope.
Yeah, we were kids. Young, dumb, and thought we knew everything. We loved each other like crazy. But we were both so damn stubborn. A match made in heaven and forged in hell. Ty used to say. Ooh.
He shook his head, a small, wry smile on his face.
He was the one who was there for me when it all fell apart. I was a wreck, drinking too much, feeling sorry for myself. And Ty,
He didn't judge. He just showed up.
sat with me, let me be a mess. He was that kind of friend, the kind you only get once in a lifetime, if you're lucky.
The memory of that time, of his friend's quiet, unwavering loyalty, was a powerful, emotional thing. Caleb fell silent, his gaze lost in the past. And in that silence, Ty began his monologue. He did not speak of events. He did not tell a story. He spoke of feelings. He spoke with the quiet, intimate, and deeply familiar knowledge of a man who had been inside Caleb's own heart.
You were so scared back then.
His voice was a low, almost hypnotic murmur, the voice of a ghost. Caleb's head snapped towards him, his eyes wide with a sudden confused shock.
You were terrified that you had failed. that you weren't good enough for her. You felt like you had this huge, empty hole inside of you, and you were trying to fill it with anything you could find. Whiskey, rodeo, other women. But nothing worked, because the hole was shaped exactly like her.
The words, so accurate, so deeply, painfully true, were a direct hit. They were the very same secrets, the very same fears that Caleb had confessed to Ty in a drunken, tearful haze on the floor of a cheap motel room a decade ago. Secrets he had never, ever told another living soul.
How could you possibly know that?
His voice was a strained, terrified whisper. He was no longer looking at a friendly, anonymous stranger. He was looking at something else. Something impossible. Ty didn't look at him. He kept his gaze fixed on the road ahead, his own voice still a low, steady, and relentless murmur.
And you were so angry at her. But you weren't really angry at her. You were angry at yourself, because you knew deep down that you were the one who had broken it. You had this beautiful, wild, and precious thing in your hands, and you squeezed it too tight. You smothered it, because you were so damn scared of losing it.
He finally turned to look at Caleb, and his eyes, in the dim, shadowy light of the truck's cab, seemed to hold a profound, ancient, and deeply familiar sadness.
You never told her that, though, did you? That you were the one who broke it. That you were sorry. You were too proud, too stubborn, and you've regretted it. Every single day since.
Caleb was no longer just confused. He was terrified. His hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. His heart was a frantic, wild drum against his ribs. This was not a man. This was a ghost. A ghost who knew the deepest, most secret, and most shameful truths of his own soul. He was in a truck with a man who could read his mind, and he was completely and utterly freaking out. The silence in the cab of the truck was a thick, suffocating thing, a physical presence. Caleb's mind was a frantic, chaotic scramble, trying to make sense of the impossible. The man beside him, this dirty, bearded, and heartbroken stranger, knew the deepest, most secret contents of his soul. It was not a guess. It was a perfect, word-for-word recitation of a conversation, of a confession he had made to only one person in his entire life, a person who was dead. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his gaze darting nervously between the empty, dark road ahead and the strange, quiet man in his passenger seat. His heart was hammering against his ribs, a wild, terrified drumbeat. He was in a truck with a man who could read his mind. He was in a truck with a ghost.
Who are you?
His voice was a strained, terrified whisper, barely audible over the rumble of the truck's engine. The stranger didn't answer right away. He just continued to look at him, his eyes full of a profound, familiar, and deeply sad wisdom. The silence stretched, and with every passing second, Caleb's panic grew, his mind teetering on the very edge of a full-blown freak-out. Finally, the man spoke, his voice a low, quiet, and impossibly familiar murmur.
I think you already know.
Caleb's mind was a whirlwind of denial. It was impossible. It was a trick. He was tired. He was stressed. He was hallucinating. Ty was gone. He had mourned him. He had spread his ashes. He had said goodbye. This could not be happening. The stranger, seeing the raw, terrified disbelief on his friend's face, knew that words were no longer enough. He had to show him. He had to give him a piece of irrefutable, physical proof. He slowly, deliberately reached up with his right hand and pulled down the hood of the worn, dirty sweatshirt he was wearing, revealing his matted, overgrown hair. Then, with his other hand, he reached up and, with a single fluid motion, he began to pull at the thick, untrimmed beard that had been his mask, his disguise for the last 2 years. It was not a real beard. It was a fake, a masterful and incredibly realistic prosthetic he had bought in a theatrical supply store in Calgary, a final, desperate layer of anonymity. He pulled it away from his face, and the man underneath was revealed. He was thinner than Caleb remembered. His face was gaunt, his cheekbones sharp, his skin pale under a layer of dirt and grime. He was a man who had been through hell, but he was undeniably, unmistakably, and miraculously him. He turned to his friend, his own face a mask of profound, sorrowful emotion.
Look at me, Caleb.
His voice was a quiet, firm command.
Really look, and ask me again who I am.
Caleb stared. He looked at the familiar strong line of his jaw, at the small, faded scar above his left eyebrow, a souvenir from a long-forgotten bar fight, and he looked into his eyes, the haunted, kind, and impossibly alive eyes of his best friend, the eyes of his brother, the eyes of Ty Borden. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The roar of the truck's engine, the rumble of the tires on the asphalt, it all faded into a distant, muted hum. The only thing that was real was the face of the man beside him, a face he had thought he would never see again. He slammed on the brakes. The truck's tires let out a long, protesting screech as the massive vehicle skidded to a violent, shuddering halt in the middle of the empty, dark country road. He just stared, his hands trembling on the steering wheel, his face a mask of utter, stunned, and complete disbelief. The ghost in his truck was real. His own voice, when it finally came, was not a shout. It was a breath, a whisper, a single, impossible, and prayer-like word.
T?
The single whispered word, Ty, hung in the stunned absolute silence of the truck's cab, a fragile, impossible question. Caleb stared, his hands still gripping the steering wheel, his knuckles white, his mind a complete and utter blank. He was looking at a ghost. He was looking at a man he had mourned, a man whose ashes he had helped to spread on a windy hilltop. And that man was sitting right beside him, his eyes full of a deep, profound, and familiar sadness. Ty didn't say anything else. He just held his friend's gaze, his own heart aching with a mixture of sorrow and a profound, quiet relief. The secret was out. He was no longer a stranger. He was known. The silence stretched for a full minute, a timeless, surreal moment in the middle of a dark, empty country road. The only sound was the frantic, panicked thumping of Caleb's own heart. He slowly, deliberately put the truck in park and turned off the engine, plunging them into an even deeper, more absolute quiet.
It can't be.
He said, his voice a low, strangled whisper.
No, it's not possible. I'm seeing things. I'm tired. That's all.
He was trying to rationalize, to find a logical explanation for the impossible, miraculous, and terrifying sight in front of him.
It's me, Caleb.
Ty's voice was a low, gentle rumble, full of an unwavering certainty.
I know it doesn't make any sense, but it's me.
Caleb finally, slowly, seemed to accept the impossible. The initial stunned shock began to recede, replaced by a new and even more powerful wave of emotion. His face, which had been a mask of pale, terrified disbelief, began to crumble. His eyes, which had been wide and unseeing, now filled with tears.
But how?
How? He saw the report, the DVT, the ashes. We said goodbye to you, man. Het. E.
The words were a raw, wounded cry, the sound of a man's entire reality being ripped apart at the seams.
It was a lie, Caleb.
Ty said, his own voice now hardening with the cold, hard rage of his own returning memories.
All of it. It was a lie. I don't know how, and I don't know why. Not yet, but I was never on that plane. I was never cremated. I was taken, and they did something to me. They took my memory. They turned me into someone else.
The story, so insane, so unbelievable, was spoken with such a simple, profound, and undeniable truth that Caleb could not help but believe him. The full, monstrous weight of what had been done to his friend, to his brother, began to settle in. And then the grief, the 4 long years of it, the grief he had so carefully, so manfully suppressed, finally, completely, and utterly broke free. A gut-wrenching, animalistic sob erupted from his chest, the sound of a man's heart breaking all over again, but this time with a strange, new, and terrible joy. He was not crying for the friend he had lost. He was crying for the friend he had just impossibly found. He launched himself across the cab of the truck, his arms wrapping around Ty in a fierce, desperate, and almost violent embrace. He was sobbing, his large, strong body shaking with the force of 4 years of unshed tears. Ty held him, his own tears now falling freely, a profound, quiet sense of homecoming settling over him. He was home, he was with his brother. They stayed that way for a long, timeless moment. 2 old friends, 2 brothers, reunited in the middle of a dark, lonely road, their shared, tearful embrace a single, bright, and powerful beacon of light in a world that had been dark for far too long. The questions, the hows, the whys, they could wait. In this one, single, perfect, and miraculous moment, the only thing that mattered was that they were together again.